Welcome on in. Todd Strain is in the house, as is John Schaeffer, of course. Weekday afternoons, 3 o'clock on SD Sports 760. Thanks for being back with us, John.
It's good to be here. Exciting time of year. Looking forward to the next hour.
And we all need to have these handy
Yes,
because still waiting for something to happen. AJ Preller, you're on the clock, buddy. 3 o'clock Monday afternoon. Very, very interesting time, and maybe not a surprise that it's taken a little while for the wheels to kind of get turning.
I think he needed to see his team do what they've done. And now he's been put in this situation where what other choice do you have other than to try to supplement and get yourself into the postseason and potentially make some type of run. But they're playing well. I mean, it was hanging the balance here. If they go 2-7 over these 9 games, they're not a buyer. They've gone 8-1, though, and they're in position to be in position.
To deal or not to deal, that's the question, right? And since the Skubal trade, things have started to happen just the last few moments before we came on air. You saw Twitter, X, boom, boom, boom. A couple deals came down. So keep those phones nearby.
We'll have it nearby. We'll keep you posted. And John, lots to discuss with the deadline, but they had to get there first as buyers. In order to do that, Craig Stammen and company have gotten really creative with this rotation and really impressive. At these group of guys that we looked at as kind of untenable, that could be sort of the nail in the coffin for the season, they've held it together enough for them to go on this run and prove to Preller that they should buy.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've referenced the 2024 Tigers with this pitching chaos recently, and how they've navigated it is remarkable, and it still remains to be seen whether you can actually do that for 50-plus games. It's one thing to do it for a week, and they've done it against lower competition. I give them credit for it. Can they continue to do it, or will they need to with the deadline coming up tomorrow? Will they address some of those starting pitching issues?
Yeah, they've gone from the hot talent lava we all heard so much about, to pitching chaos. I like the phrasing. It's fun. But this doesn't work if the pitchers don't endorse it and get on board with it. And to a man, everyone in that Padre bullpen or starting rotation has endorsed this new pitching chaos. And so they get a lot of credit, because not all staffs, not all pitchers and all staffs, I think, would maybe buy into what they're doing right now.
And they've had the bodies. It's just a matter of kind of the effectiveness and not getting the length that they've needed. And maybe it has helped having somebody like Craig Stammen, who knows what it's like to be in their shoes, as a reliever, who's been an opener at times in the past and that sort of thing, to kind of communicate the plan and get them on board. It's been pretty impressive.
It has, and to your point, I think Craig Stammen has referenced also the idea that you can't have a repeat of 2021. He was a reliever on that team. They really struggled with their staff in the second half of the year. They ran out of starting pitching. It's always a concern to run out of starting pitching. I would think that A.J. Preller will have to address it to some degree, even with the success the staff has had over the last 10 days.
And there are some names that he will not be trading for, because some of them are off the market. Today, the Cubs got Kevin Gausman from the Jays. Freddie Peralta, there was a lot of Freddie Peralta talk as a possibility. He goes from the Mets to the Rays. Obviously, Tarek Skubal, the big splash so far of the deadline. Much more on his move from the Tigers and the Dodgers. And all the chatter around that coming up a bit later. Luis Castillo as well on Saturday from the White Sox being buyers, getting him from the Mariners. John, what do you think of this crop of pitchers and the possibilities now for the Padres, who I think we figured would be buying probably comfortably below that Tarek Skubal tier?
With Preller, you never know, obviously, but I think it makes more sense for them to be more like dipping their toe in as opposed to jumping in, because you also look at their system, and according to most that cover minor league baseball, they don't have the most impactful system or the most assets to potentially give up, and we don't know about the financial constraints they might be dealing with. So I think they'll be a little more timid, but with A.J. Preller, you don't fully know, but I'd be shocked if he doesn't address to some extent his major league roster.
Pitching chaos has been great, but it's not sustainable. They need depth. They need reinforcements. How are they going to get those? There's not a lot of big names out there still available. So hopefully you get a average pitcher in here, average starting pitcher, and Ruben Niebla can kind of work his magic. It'll be interesting to see, though, if Adrian Morejon is a piece that they have to send out to get some frontline starting depth.
It's a good tease for later in the show, but it's a good conversation. Is it a Hunter Green, George Kirby type, or two kind of middle back of the rotation types that can just kind of get you through the innings? Here's the look at the wild card standings heading into the week. D-backs and Phillies tied at 59 and 53, holding down the final 2 spots. Padres sit just 1 game back. It's hard to believe all the teams that they have jumped to get to this point. Miami is lurking, as are the Pirates, Cardinals, Nationals, among others. John, what do you think of the move the Padres have made and how gettable the wild card is now compared to maybe how it looked about 2-3 weeks ago?
Well, they were 5.5 back against the Blue Jays after they lost the first game of that 3-game series, and they picked up 4.5 games in about 2 weeks of play. So to your point, it's very gettable. The middle of the National League is very soft. I think the Padres would like to think their ceiling is as high as most of the teams they're competing with for those wild card spots. So I don't see any option other than going for it, so to speak, at this point if you're the Padres.
Philly, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, they've all lost 3 of 7, or 3 wins in their last 10 games, or 3 and 7. Padres are 8-2, so that is the flip right there that we've seen in these wild card standings.
And how interesting is this that there's the trade deadline on Monday, and who are they playing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? The Arizona Diamondbacks to kind of set the tone now for really the second half of the season post big league trade deadline. We'll take a look at this week's schedule and the interesting note that Derek mentioned. We'll have much more on Michael King and the decision to move him to Monday in a much bigger game in Arizona. So those 4 very, very crucial in the wild card race, and the Padres back home Friday for 3 against the Astros. We'll catch Sunday's series finale here on NBC7. We'll follow that one with a post-game edition of Sports Night in San Diego. How important is this series? It's 4 games against one of the teams in front of you, but there's still a lot of baseball to follow that, including another series against the Snakes at Petco later in the year.
I mean, I think it's critically important because, it's a 4-game set and you're trailing this team. So if you go there and you lose 3 out of 4 games, you would potentially be, you would be 3 games behind Arizona. So you got to play well. I don't think you can just, finagle your way through a 500 record over the next 50 games and just figure the teams in front of you are going to play worse than that. I think they'll need to play well enough beginning this week against Arizona.
I think it's minimal importance, only because the Phillies have come back to them.
Sure.
So it's not like they're now just trying to track down Arizona and that's the only team. There's another team in play that you can kind of reel in, and I think we get so tied up in the trade deadline and, it's imminent, and now we go straight to the postseason. There's almost 2 months of regular season baseball still to play, so there's a lot of time left.
2024 is asking a lot, but I mean, good feel about this team, just based on what we've seen the last week and their ability to kind of make a significant push here in the last couple months.
I think the best 62-game stretch in franchise history was their 43-19 finish in 2024. That would still shock me, but then again, they are 8-1 here over their last 9 games. And what were we saying in 2024? They addressed their bullpen that deadline. They had serious needs in their bullpen in 2024 that they addressed. I think this time around they have more significant needs in their rotation. Can they be addressed? But I don't think with this current iteration of the team, we're looking at some type of 30-10 or 40-20. But I do think they've proven they can navigate their way to the postseason in this final 2-month stretch.
All right, much more with John on the pods. How about this, fellas? The news that we all figured would probably happen, the ultimate outcome. Tarek Skubal in a Dodger uniform, now in the Dodger dugout after yesterday's trade, getting reacquainted with Dave Roberts. How about that, John Schaeffer?
Well, the trade really isn't surprising, as you just made reference to, because it would almost be surprising if he ended up anywhere else, truthfully. And the interesting thing here is everyone wants to be critical of LA, and I completely understand it, and we're heading towards the CBA situation. But this isn't a free agent signing where it's just like blank check. This is where other teams have assets as well, and the Tigers deem the Dodgers offer to be the best. To me, it feels lighter. I don't know all these systems as well as others do. But the other thing is they make this deal on a Saturday, and there's still so much time to play offers off each other, and for whatever reason, they already made the deal.
I brought that up earlier when I got into work to Darnay. Why not? The Dodgers offer wasn't a blow your wheels off. It was just kind of, for most baseball insiders, kind of middling for what they expected. Why not play it off the next day and a half, see what else you could get? Maybe there's an injury. Maybe one team steps up. Also, I think the Dodgers made this deal a little bit out of fear, because say Milwaukee made this deal and you're facing the Brewers, Miz and Skubal in a short series, you could almost see the Dodgers a little fearful of this chance to three-peat facing those two guys. So I think the Dodgers have the prospects to do it, and they say, well, why not?
Yeah, I want to run a couple hot takes off you guys that I've seen just in part of the conversation on social media since this deal came about. The first being, well, anyone could have done this. So if you're mad at the Dodgers, be mad at the Rays, be mad at the Brewers, be mad at anybody else. Are you buying that? It's just that simple. Anybody could have made this trade, especially since LA's return didn't seem all that impressive.
I mean, I am buying the idea that someone obviously was put in a position where they could have taken or left the deal. I'm very surprised if this happened in a vacuum and other teams weren't at least involved in the periphery to say, this is the offer we have at hand. this is what we're asking of you. If you provide this, we will make that trade for you. I saw it last night, I think, on the Angels broadcast. Their play-by-play announcer had made a similar point. How are other teams around baseball not putting their foot in the ground and coming up with an offer to beat this offer specifically for Skubal?
But isn't part of it the fact that these prospects don't mean anything to the Dodgers, but the prospects that the Rays, that the other teams would give up are so much more significant because you need that cheap, controllable talent because you have limited funds and assets, as we've seen with the Padres.
But it's sometimes, if you're playing a sport, you're a member of a team, you're a fan of your franchise, you want your team or your owner or your GM to go for it. If I'm on the Rays or I'm on the Brewers, I would love to have a little pick-me-up in my step. Sure, we gave up our 2 and 3 best prospects in the organization, but we got Skubal. We feel good, we feel talented, and we're going to take on the Dodgers with our new power staff. That is kind of like what you want sometimes, whether you're a player or a fan.
The other take that I saw, and this is kind of leaning into like almost conspiracy theory territory, is this is exactly what other owners wanted to give them more leverage in the discussion once the CBA rolls around for a hard cap and this and that. Like if the Dodgers go on a run here 3 straight, a crazy amount of talent, it's easier for owners of smaller markets to say, we got a problem here, and that problem grew with the Kyle Tucker deal and now Tarek Skubal.
I don't buy it for a couple of reasons. I think there is a work stoppage regardless of who wins the World Series, including Tampa Bay or San Diego, if we were fortunate enough to see something incredible like that. We're too far baked in the impact of the Dodgers on baseball. And by the way, the CBA negotiations and the looming lockout aren't solely about LA. It is about what is most beneficial for the sport and the ownership specifically. But whether the Dodgers win the World Series or not, I think we're so much further down the road that it's not going to impact the 2027, it's not going to impact the upcoming CBA is the way I see it.
The Dodgers, yes, they have financial advantages that other teams don't have, and it's not great for competitive balance in baseball. But some Major League Baseball experts will say if you put in a salary cap and a salary floor, the Dodgers organization might be even better equipped to deal in those terms because they're smarter and they have a lot of resources that they use that they could win on players that other teams are not winning on. And they could almost out-scheme other people organizational-wise to win with the salary cap. Kind of they're smarter, They're the smart financial guys.
They're going to be well-run regardless. Are there some things that need to be put into the sport to bring the Dodgers back to the rest of baseball? I think most would obviously argue that at this point, but that's a conversation for well beyond the impact of this Tarek Skubal probably trade, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, a lot of teams, and somebody else pointed this out, couldn't deal with giving $60 million to Kyle Tucker and him having a down year. Yeah. That would
100%.
be damaging to your team and your prospects, and LA is equipped to kind of deal with that, and now they add Tarek Skubal. And the other part of it, too, was everybody's just making the assumption that he's going to sign with the Dodgers anyway.
Yeah,
that's part of the conversation.
Different part of it.
They were thinking he was going to be a rental and would probably leave for the Dodgers maybe at the end. But get your guy in here, win a World Series, show him how awesome your team is, and maybe he stays.
Milwaukee's never won a World Series.
Yeah.
What is the point? How much are you willing to give? The Peter Seidler way of running an organization. Yeah. What are you willing to do to try to win? Yeah. And obviously Milwaukee wasn't willing to go far enough in this conversation.
Both those guys have been discussed a lot in advance of the trade deadline. And it feels at this point like Mason Miller is a lock to stay in San Diego. I think if it was a trade, it'd be a huge surprise. Adrian Morejon, though, John, not so certain. I think that's probably the center of most of the discussion, the intrigue between now and 3 p.m. on Sunday.
There's already discussion tonight about the possibility of Morejon moving to the Yankees and maybe a deal being rejected. I don't know to what extent that was actually the deal that was offered. Bob Nightingale reporting about the idea of a Yankee starter, Will Warren, for Adrian Morejon. I think at the end of the day, I think Miller definitely stays. And I still feel as if the further we get down the road here, they've won 8 of 9, the position they're in, 1 out, just a couple of out of the second wild card. Shoot, you're only 5 games behind the Cubs right now for the top wild card. I still think ultimately Adrian Morejon is too important to this team right now. I think he stays. That's my guess.
I would tend to agree with you. My only concern or hesitancy is what else do the Padres have that other teams want? Mm-hmm. What could the Padres give up to get back quality starting pitching? And I keep coming back to Morejon. He's the piece that's going to get you some depth and length and arms in that rotation. I don't know what else attracts major league teams.
Fair.
When they look at the Padres roster as far as players that the Padres are willing to deal, that'll get you anything.
And that's the one opportunity to kind of thread the needle between being a buyer and being a seller. Get yourself some help in the rotation that ideally a player that you have for years to come. Whereas Morejon, good chance he leaves during free agency. Does that hurt you come October? Potentially. Does it help you get through some innings at the start of the game? I wonder, as much as I like Morejon, that's one I have a tough time with just because the need is so dire and we've seen them miss out on opportunities to recoup and, in turn just seen free agents walk with nothing in return.
I guess you got to look at it like, is he replaceable? Like, is he replaceable? Even when your strength is your bullpen. Yeah. You've been dealing with an injury to someone like Jason Adam, right? That's an important piece. You have other high leverage relievers, but Adrian Morejon is a one-of-one other than Mason Miller, and he would be the best available reliever in baseball if he was, in fact, made available right now.
You get a considerable return.
Other than Mason Miller, and it would be a considerable return, although he is a rental and he's not Miller with the 3 years of control. If you're the organization, I'm sure A.J. Preller's had sleepless nights on it. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation.
He only has sleepless nights.
That's a good point.
And there's also the all on the diamond, everything that happens on the diamond. You also have to consider the financial ramifications to this. Morejon's probably going to command a huge dollar amount for his next contract. He might want to be the closer somewhere.
Absolutely.
And we know what kind of financial numbers we're talking about there.
Thank you, Derek. How about that? Game 162, potentially with the playoff spot on the line between the D-backs and the Padres. That would be fun, interesting to say the least. But Joe Musgrove, Nick Pivetta, Tuesday, Lake Elsinore, the significance of the progress that they're making and the possibility of sometime in the next few weeks, month, getting those guys back on the mound.
I think it's fascinating, but if you're A.J. Preller, you can't really be counting on players because you're not going to really have a feel for it until after the deadline. Yeah. So unless you know something that we don't, and it's hard to know when it comes to the health specifically of starting pitchers, I think you have to be very cautiously optimistic because you don't know if you're getting anything. You'd love to get something. I mean, Musgrove, it's been 2 years. Yeah. We haven't seen him since October of 2024, so you're wishful. Pivetta, he's got a track record where he's had missed time in a season. He's bounced back to some extent. But if I'm A.J. Preller, how much of that is part of the conversation at the trade deadline? I would try to kind of separate it and still address the needs I have today as opposed to what these players could mean for this team 3 weeks from now or more.
Yeah, you can't count on having those guys, but if they do pitch well and they do come back and contribute, it's kind of like found money.
Right.
Because they're both quality veterans and we know what they can do, even if they're at 50, 60% of their best.
But you cannot assume that you're going to get those two guys once every 5 days. No. If they combine for one consistent starting pitcher, I mean, that's a boost given what they've had, but it's hard to really bank on much more beyond that.
Maybe they can be part of pitching chaos.
They might have to be, right?
Here, sure. There,
Good point.
And I think Joe Musgrove has discussed that. I think typically it's like when you get to 5 innings, then we can bring you up.
Yeah.
He said it might be when you get to 3 innings. And it's a long relief, bridge type role, maybe a 2 or 3 inning start. And now they have an example of that working. And that would be a boost to have Joe and Nick even in that role.
I just want to see Joe Musgrove healthy on a mound, helping the Padres. I mean, he's been so meaningful to the organization, but now he's missed so much time. It would be an amazing story for him to impact the club in some type of manner and help them down the stretch. But again, that's more of a Hollywood script than necessarily something we'll see play out. I would love to see it play out, but you can only be somewhat hopeful, I think, based on his injury history right now.
And Pivetta has a very tricky or meaningful financial implication too coming up with when he comes back and when he can opt in and things like that. Right. So there's other considerations as well.